the Adventure Party for the first week of May 2021. This week, it's over. The greatest RPG of all time has been selected. And you're going to have to listen all the way through to find out what it is. The Adventure Party. Because the tabletop and gaming the Irish way. Welcome to the party. I'm Scarr.
I'm Savage.
I'm Liam.
And I'm Shane.
And it has been a long and bloody battle. 64 of the greatest and most famous and most gimmicky RPGs ever to be put to paper or PDF have entered the arena. And through multiple rounds of overblown and completely wrong arguing, we have reduced the pool to 4.
Broken spines litter the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, actually, no, they weren't. The spines weren't broken on these books. No, we never read any of them.
We remedied some of those. And for those who come after and say, "Oh, why didn't you do it this way? Why didn't it go that way?" I say to you, you weren't there. You weren't there when the dice were rolling, when the titans were falling, where the usurpers were rising. You weren't there when we had to correct and redirect and sometimes eviscerate our darlings. You weren't there. You could have been. You can go back and listen. You're here now, though. We've got 4. They're the last 4 standing. Each of them bearing its scars. Each of them with a tally of kills. But now we've got to whittle it down to 1. This crucible isn't finished until we've burned away to 1 solitary victor. And how are we going to decide that victor, Shane?
We are going to decide by the only way an RPG knows, with dice. So, first up to be glorified or vilified will be...
You want to explain what we're doing?
We're going to see who's going first, and then we're going to talk the merits and flaws of that one for, 10 to 15 of your time on this earth. And then we will move on to the next.
The end of the whole thing, we're gonna vote up for our preferences. So, unlike before, we voted at the end of each discussion. Now we are going to talk about a lot of them and then vote.
Yeah.
Collected at the end.
Exactly.
No, I don't think of it as voting. If we're using the dice to decide here, because that's a role-playing game way, then this is a diceless role-playing game system whereby we're allocating our, our pool
preferences
of action points.
Excellent. Absolutely, yeah.
Resource allocation.
Does that make Eurovision the biggest LARP on Earth?
It's got better costuming than any LARP I've seen.
Okay, let's go.
All
so,
right.
what's first on the block?
Doherty's costume was pretty crap, but that was the point.
What do we got?
Alright, the first one up is, of course, the Big Daddy rising from the depths. It's Call of Cthulhu, the premier horror RPG. Its victims include the entirety of Powered by the Apocalypse, the King Arthur Pendragon RPG, one of my personal favourites, Savage Worlds, and Newcomer Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
Nice.
Quite the tally.
Yeah.
No real soft brackets there and all of that.
No, it is proven immune to mortal RPGs and their weapons.
So, Shane, put 10 minutes on the clock and let's get into this.
Right.
It's on.
Well, who wants to see this win? I mean, this old game has been farting around forever. Written by some guy in the 19th century, don't quote me. And it's a bunch of sort of messing around in Victorian or 1920s era, or I don't know, maybe it runs in the 80s sometimes. Is this really what we're going to play for the next century? Is this the best RPG?
Like, I'm just thinking now, now that this is getting serious and we're not just disposing of well-loved and excellent role-playing games just for lols, leaving aside generic systems, like, okay, Savage World certainly has its place, and that was a hard one for Call of Cthulhu to overcome, but like, leaving aside generic systems, if there were only to be one role-playing game left, like a Desert Island kind of role-playing game, I think I might quite like it to be Call of Cthulhu. It's got its problems, and it's obviously a very old school design where the game system is more about like chances of achieving a thing and less about building the atmosphere. The atmosphere has to come from elsewhere in this game, but like as a setting, for some reason, it just works so well. And even though you have to leave out some of the, proper Lovecraft stuff like racism and add in a load of extra stuff, like often a Call of Cthulhu game that you play at a con has got basically very little to do with Lovecraftian mythos anyway. But yeah, I could see this being the greatest role-playing game of all time.
It certainly keeps surprising me just how enduring and popular it is. It is apparently starting to outsell D&D in Japan and possibly some other places as well.
But, I mean, if we're then looking at it right, that it doesn't have anything to do... A lot of games don't have anything to do with the Cthulhu mythos itself, and if the system is awful, how could it be the best? Because the system is awful. It's D percentile that hasn't moved on. Like, the only real difference between editions is the dice you might roll for damage, and maybe some tinkering around how you get ticks on skills for learning to increase it in between sessions. How they change, how they generate your physical stats might change a little from, roll a dice and multiply it by 15 or something. There's not that much difference in between. You could compare the 7 heads of Cthulhu, and you'd struggle to say which is which. It is 7 heads now, right?
Sonnet 7th edition released in 2014, which was an update from a 10-year-old 6th edition.
Or probably about due another one.
No, and 7th Ed had pretty significant rule revisions, but yeah, the core is still there.
I mean, look at D&D, right? Like every version of D&D. So, okay, there's minor adjustments, say, from 3rd Ed to 3.5. The jumps between editions have been massive. They're totally different games. And similarly, if you look at even, let's say, Exalted or something like that, the systems in between each edition are radically different. Call of Cthulhu is nearly a copy-paste.
Yeah, well, if it ain't broke.
But it is broke.
In what way? Like, it's. I think it.
Who like Call of Cthulhu likes the system?
It doesn't get in the way that much.
But who hates it?
I do.
All right.
Right, so fight on. Okay, so the one weakness I'd say, one weakness. I think a weakness of Call of Cthulhu system-wise, I actually think it is pretty spot on for. It doesn't come through the mechanics, but the tone, it's kind of consistent. It tells a particular kind of story in a particular kind of way. Mechanically, you're fighting humans, or you're fighting things that you can't fight, that really shouldn't have stat blocks. And there's a sort of narrow middle ground for things that are weird but shootable. I've always felt like Call of Cthulhu had a bit of an enemy problem. Like, the big named enemies are simply things you can't fight at all. You go into... We should probably compare like with like here, and as there's only 4 finalists, they're going to have to serve as the backdrop. So I'm not going to talk about how Call of Cthulhu compares to D&D, but how it compares to something like Deadlands, which has a much better sort of range of weird baddies that evoke the themes of the setting and the tone, but are also something you can engage with mechanically. So is Call of Cthulhu, maybe don't have a problem with percentile, but I do think it has a kind of an enemy problem. In that it's very hard to give your opponents, your players, something from the canon to take on that isn't, this week's version of Cultist.
So I think Deadlands enemies are something that you need to be able to fight and kill and shoot and dynamite and sword and maybe complicated magic rules. Call of Cthulhu enemies in general aren't really enemies. It's like the way the new Transformers films. The Transformers aren't really characters like they used to be in the old days. They're an environmental event. They're a thing that happens. So like in Call of Cthulhu, you're not really fighting an enemy. You're fighting an event. And so it's more about figuring stuff out and coming up with solutions. And I know Deadlands kind of has a bit of that as well, but I think it's just kind of the concept of what your objective is different. I love that. Like, I love investigative type of games.
But is it even that good an investigative game?
It's up against Gumshoe, which made it here as well, and it claims to be the best investigative game. Oh, sorry, is that spoilers?
Yeah.
No.
I haven't been paying attention.
Well, it's going to be fight. It's going to be...
But it'd be like, how do you investigate things in Call of Cthulhu? Like, you're reliant on... You throw a whole pile of clues in front of the players, and you're relying on them going, okay, well, I go do this thing. Okay, well, give me a libraries check. You fail. All right, well, let's just throw the script out the window.
But think about this. Like, can you think of, outside of maybe games that won't be named here, but on this list, there probably isn't a system that's better supported by really, really well produced and published scenarios. And I'm thinking Mask of the Red Death, what's the one on the train?
Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff that I know Pellegrin or Chaosium, whoever's publishing it now, have put out really detailed, really lavish scenarios and campaigns that have loads of handouts, they've got loads of artifacts, they've got loads of, in-world paraphernalia that fuels an investigation. Like, Call of Cthulhu probably isn't mechanically the best investigation game on this list, but it is one that has been supported with enough stuff for your players and the characters to actually start investigating for real by, looking at journal entries and comparing ticket stubs and checking maps that have been provided by the writers. This is probably one of those places where the scenario writers have done a lot of the heavy work in terms of making Call of Cthulhu what it is. It is so many classic scenarios. Whereas the mechanics have stayed kind of static, probably because the people who want to play Call of Cthulhu aren't necessarily that interested in the mechanics of Call of Cthulhu, but they're really interested in all of the rich supporting material, the extended mythos, and then the stuff that's been specifically written for the game. And I know that you can play Call of Cthulhu in many different time periods as well, so I jested a little bit there at the start.
But that same extension, could you then not just use that rich material and use a setting agnostic system or an independent system?
If you're willing to put in the work, sure.
But I'm only arguing for it on the merits of its, versus the opposition here today.
Well, I guess where I'm getting at is if you said you want to play a game of Call of Cthulhu, I would not use Call of Cthulhu for it. I would use a different system, which shall be mentioned later.
Yeah, but, so I think there's something to be said for the fact that doesn't really happen very often. Like, people do use the Call of Cthulhu system, and the fact that there's so much material for it, I think, implies that there's something about it that sparks the imagination. Like, it gets people going, and it makes them write stuff. In fact, maybe in a kind of sinister way, it infects their brains. I think to some extent the proof might be in the pudding here, if that's the right phrase to use.
Okay, where are we on time for Call of Cthulhu?
We've still got another 40 seconds.
Can I just say, I do think there's something to what the other Shane just said there. The one thing I notice about Call of Cthulhu, whenever I look at it and wonder, well, that's not probably for me. I like some mythos stuff. I'm not sure I would do all the stuff they do. But I look at it and I think gaming specifically is the place where Call of Cthulhu has made its biggest impact. Well, we can say literature, but I feel like, you don't see very many Cthulhu movies making any bank. You don't see that many Cthulhu comics or, TV shows or all that kind of stuff. This genre really lives in gaming and in RPG specifically. And I think that's its big thing, is that this is, along with D&D, one of the franchises that works best in gaming. There's something about being the investigator on the ground, being the one who digs into this mystery, that is fundamentally best suited for gaming over any other medium. And I think that's why Cthulhu has this enduring legacy. Now, you can certainly say that, you can take that and use a system with it, sure, but I think Call of Cthulhu has proven over 40 years that it is tapping into something eldritch and fundamental that we cannot truly explain.
Hooray! I love Call of Cthulhu now.
Yeah, we've found the winner first time. Excellent. I'd argue that it has much more cultural influence across mediums than you're giving it credit for. The Ghostbusters have fought Cthulhu. In the Mouth of Madness is not specifically calls out the mythos, but it is so clearly influenced. That's a great movie. You should go watch it.
But let's not conflate the Cthulhu mythos with the Call of Cthulhu game.
Oh, now you want to drill down to just the game. I thought we were going to... Now you want to stick to the finalists.
Oh, well, I mean, I know D&D and all got eliminated, but let's just say the Conan movies, or should I tie in? How tangential do you want to get here?
No, that is absolutely fair, Liam. So we do have to restrict ourselves to a system that has seen some updates recently, but 40 years. Long time to think you're right without changing.
That usually gets easier the further you go on, though.
I would contend that of the four here, it is by far and away, not just because it's been out the longest, but because people are so inspired to write great gaming material for it. There's great supplements, there's great entire campaigns. There's great one-shots as well. Haunted House is still a great introductory one-shot to role-playing without needing a sword. So yeah, I think we've run our time on this guy.
Yeah, if we don't move along, then we're going to have even more adventuring party for people to enjoy.
We've broken our own rules. We'll get penalties. Okay, dice it off. What's next on the list? Cthulhu again.
No. I've got a different dice this time, and it is saying that our next person on the pulpit is Blades in the Dark.
Hoped I'd have more time to kind of sow arguments for this one inst among my other arguments. Okay, let's hands up who's played it.
Not hands up. This is an audio podcast.
Audio hands up who's played it. I've played it and run it.
I have not.
I own a copy.
I have watched some Let's Plays and done some reading on it.
Right, uphill struggle for me here. This is definitely the best. There's no question in my mind. I was thinking about this just before we came on while I was eating some eggs. Shell on, of course, you got to get the whole goodness. And Blades in the Dark it's fresh, it's zeitgeisty, for as much as RPGs ever are. It borrows very heavily from the Dishonored computer games, which is probably the best touchstone for most people who don't know it.
And then all the Thief fans cried out in anguish.
Yeah. Okay, Thief, yeah. There's a bit of that as well, but there's very much the Victoriana, turn of the century kind of technology, coupled with very heavily gothic fantasy. You're dealing with ghosts, you're dealing with demon whales, you're dealing with a city shrouded in smog and darkness perpetually. Think Dark City or Mort from the Slay universe. Mechanically, really interesting game. It has managed to have classes and crunchiness and also character aspects and kind of really finite character progression in that they have a life to live and then it's done. You don't kind of perpetually head off into the bigger numbers. It is player-driven, player-focused and facing. It's like there is combat, but it isn't the thing you spend 80% of the session at. And it has structurally, it is more avant-garde, let's say, than the more traditional sort of stuff we play, in that you're invited to retcon in the scene and let the players and the GM go back and forth about what's going to happen, but with enough mechanical framework that it isn't just a game of, oh, well, I think it isn't just Bill and Ted at the end of the first movie. Oh, well, if that's the case, I'll prepare a trap, and if that's the case, I'll prepare a key. I think it's great.
So if I can interrupt for a moment, is this not just a heist game for people who hate planning heists with a stress system that lets you retcon and say, oh, I did plan this all along, which also is trying to make up for a fairly weak system at low levels?
Yeah, it's a heist game for people who don't like planning heists, yeah. Because the fun of heists is watching the twists and turns unfold, not knowing how
Mick,
it's going to go.
As Mrs. Doyle said, maybe I like the misery. I like the planning session. It's an integral part of the heist. And yes, I know we've all had those sessions where we're sitting around and nobody could agree on anything. And as soon as you kick in the first door, the whole plan's out the window. But that's part of the heist.
Why not? But why not? But no, it is. It's more part of the heist the way Blades in the Dark does it.
No, it's not.
You roll with the punches. Then those are
Blades in the Dark is the Ocean's movie where they go and say, oh, look, retroactively we're so clever because we thought about this thing in advance. It's I don't know.
Which is exactly how players want to feel. Like that's
not this player.
So player focused.
So Liam, you're saying that the reason you like heist games is because you don't like heist games?
No, I like heist games, but to me an integral part of the heist game, heist, is planning the heist, executing the heist, and then making the getaway. And basically what this does is that you skip the planning phase altogether, go straight into doing the heist itself. And even the post thing, okay, there can be the consequences element of the game afterwards as well, which you can deal with. But like a lot of the times, like how you get rid of your stress and stuff like that in between games is it's just done. You're rattled in your vice and your stress is gone. You're fine. Boom. Next mission.
Again, really reductive, and you're leaving on the floor all the things that a good GM can do with that. Exercising your vices, which is how you reduce stress in the game, because there's sort of a mental track and a physical track in terms of how your character's getting on. Losing limbs is no joke.
System-wise, basically, if you fail a roll, a lot of times you can have consequences that happen, like the guard turns around the corner, or you can take stress, or possibly both. You can also do things that, like the flashback stuff, or to give you extra dice, or to say, oh, well, I brought this grappling hook from earlier on retroactively. So getting rid of stress is important, and, I don't know, it just seemed from reading through the rules and from watching some Let's Plays that generally it was just kind of like, all right, you got rid of your stress, next session.
Yeah, and if you just use it as hit points, okay, that's kind of the level 1 way to play it. I'd say it's a great way to engineer even tighter and more impossible situations later on. Like there's no disconnect between going on a mission and then dealing with the consequences. Dealing with the consequences just leads to more missions and more consequences, and you're in an even worse shape because now you owe somebody something, or someone's going to find out something, or you're going to get blackmailed, or you're on the hook for a favor, or someone's got a lien on you that maybe you can't tell the rest of the party about. There's lots of ways, because these are criminals, remember, that you're playing as. Their lives are meant to be complicated, messy, and short, with brief periods of profitability.
Yeah, and there's the fact that because there's this fully fleshed out downtime system between missions, if you're blowing off all your stress, that's fine, but you're not getting anything else done, and maybe the gang needs someone to, rough up some hooligans and, clear things with the police, and you're off just, gambling or drugging or whatever, and you're not helping the team, and maybe the other players will call you on that.
How many of the party are gambling and drugging? Like, is this something one player goes off and does, and either you cut it short and...
No, everyone has a vice.
But they've all got their own separate vices to do separately, split the party. Is that the case?
Yeah.
Which is why it's a downtime activity that's largely handled a few dice rolls to get it done.
That sounds reductive, doesn't it?
You can take those outcomes and weave them into your story, which is where we unreduce the reductiveness. If you're a fan of kind of mission and base building games, like, I don't know, XCOM, there's a lot here in this in this game, because you have a party character sheet as well. It's kind of your lair or your territory that you get to build up collectively, and that you're going to come back to and use the base of operations, and then it gives you more resources later on. But it has to be managed as a group, and then you've got your own stuff to manage as an individual. So there's those stresses and strains in the downtime and in the game as well. Why is it better than Gumshoe and Call of Cthulhu and whatever our last one is? Because I think it is the most contemporary game. It borrows really deftly from all of the systems that have come before. It has aspects of Fate in it. It has aspects of D&D in it. It has aspects of
Powered by the Apocalypse.
One of my favorites, Conspiracy X, and Powered by the Apocalypse, which is kind of where it gets a start. It's become a spawning ground for other people to write games on the backbone of the system. So there's a Can't Believe It's Not Star Wars version, there's a Can't Believe It's Not Dune, Can't Believe It's Not
Black Company,
Death Company, Bad Company, Black Company. Liam?
Is there not a certain amount of people forcing their skill into a perhaps not suitable role, though? Because you start off at the game with a fairly limited pool of skill points. And, you're the bruiser guy, and okay, well, the cop patrol's coming around the corner. Okay, what'll you do? Okay, I suppose I could rip open that back door to try and get away from them, as opposed to really a stealth roll, or a prowess roll would be... prowling roll would be far more appropriate.
Appropriate, yeah, but the brawler's never going to make that roll. It's again the
well, either that or you're forced to roll you basically, because the way it works, right, is that you roll a number of dice equal to your skill, and on a 6 it's a success with no complications, a 4 5 it's a success but with complications, a 1 2 3 there's a complication, right? And so if you're rolling one dice, it's dice enough. There's probably going to be a complication, maybe some stress. If you don't have any dots, you're rolling 2 dice, take the worst. So you're screwing up.
But there are ways in the game to get more dice. There's what's called devil bargains, where you get this extra sort of side consequence to get an extra dice, or there's using stress to get an extra dice, or getting another party member to help out, which means that you get an extra dice, but they also share whatever consequence.
The group check, which can push stress onto them, yeah.
Yeah, but
But I just mean, like, at lower levels, it seems like you're doing. I guess maybe that's part of it. You're starting out. You're a starting crew. You're not going to be very good. It seems like you're taking a lot of stress and a lot of consequences for doing fairly basic things. If you're that should be part of it, just because you don't have very many skills. You really should just have more skills to start out.
I mean, if you want to.
But then the game becomes more mechanically. I mean, it starts to look a lot like D&D at that point. I like the fact that they keep it kind of low level mechanically and let negotiation find its place at the table. Okay, speaking negotiations, I don't know if I've convinced any of you to go top slot for Blades in the Dark, but personally for me, I think it's a fantastic evolution of where RPGs should be and are going. And it feeds off some really nice contemporary sources and also has it's learned a great deal from the games we've played for the last 30, 40 years. Let's move on.
Have we done the 10 minutes? Oh, yes, we have.
Oh, over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably over. We're at a half hour now.
Okay. 2 games left. Let's see which one's up first. It is Gumshoe. Oh, sorry, I forgot to give Blades in the Dark victim list. Okay, sorry. So Blades in the Dark has beaten Stars Without Number, Cyberpunk, GURPS, and Wrath and Glory.
That's a pretty soft list.
Ooh,
Middling.
well, you can say that.
Yeah, GURPS no pushover.
Cyberpunk, that's it.
I was torn on that one.
Yeah, Cyberpunk probably fell down as much because the system isn't just not very good, it's straight up awful.
Ooh, that's and also irrelevant now.
Go back to round 2, episode 2, if you want to see that argument. But yes, Gumshoe, on the other hand, has taken on Eclipse Phase, Shadowrun, 40k Fantasy Flight, and 5th Ed D&D, which is a decision in the last round, which I am getting an awful lot of flack from. Actually, no,
It's okay, Shane. None of those people's opinions matter because they're like 5th Ed.
Well, okay.
It's called listener engagement. We're all for it. Please send more complaints to Warlord Scarr.
Look. All I've got to say about 5th Ed, right, because it's not on the topic of the discussion, is there's nothing wrong with liking vanilla ice cream. There's more interesting flavors out there, but there's nothing inherently wrong with liking vanilla ice cream.
I do have some thoughts. I don't agree with this thing, obviously, because we unanimously voted for Gumshoe over 5th Ed, possibly because Sean wasn't there. I do think there's something to explore here in the controversy, in that D&D has fallen by the wayside, yet has done indirectly, possibly, a huge amount of work in bigging up and in bulking out the RPG industry. Whereas Gumshoe is, even for a popular game, one of the 64 most popular RPGs of all time and such, it's still somewhat niche. Like, it's a lot less niche than a lot of things on this list, but it is filling a very specific role. It is a specific RPG for, I want to run investigation-based games where investing my character points in successes rather than just spamming dice to roll is the order of the day. And is there a question, is Gumshoe too specific, or has the fact that there are settings for it from everything from Call of Cthulhu to outright fantasy a sign that it is actually breaking out of the niche and is proving itself worthwhile?
I don't think it was ever in that hole, really. I think investigative is a whole big genre of role playing games, and I think that same accusation could be leveled at, say, Dungeons and Dragons, for example. It's a dungeon crawler. You know how that's pretty niche. It's not. It's a genre. And Blades in the Dark now, that is boxing you into a pretty tight setting, with its Victoriana stuck in London thingy. Whereas, yeah, Gumshoe, well, I guess, in fact, you can't really buy a generic version of Gumshoe, can you? It is the engine that runs specific games, but
it doesn't warrant a book of its own. It's clearly not really up to scratch. Nothing you can put between two covers.
Well, it uses character classes which are specific to the various settings, and they've got their own skills and powers that also are specific to various settings.
So hopping in, I can now let the cat out of the bag that were I to play or run a Call of Cthulhu game, I would not use Call of Cthulhu. I would use Trail of Cthulhu, which for me, for my money, if I'm running, for me, Call of Cthulhu really is about that investigating thing, and you're maybe trying to thwart a big plan. You're never really going to come across the big bad, and it's about collaborative working together as a team to achieve that end. To me, I think Gumshoe does that far better than Call of Cthulhu itself does, which to me is nearly a high enough praise that, okay, here's a generic system, and generally I don't really like generic systems. That works well in being tailored to the setting that it wants to go in, and can actually excel better than the actual product that's designed for it. So for me, that's why Gumshoe is a great system, a great setting. And it doesn't just do investigation. If you want to do cinematic action as well, it works quite well for that too. Because it's quick, it's punchy, you're just spending points out of the pool, bam, 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 away you go.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mistake to pigeonhole this one as the investigation mechanic system, because that's what we all talk about when we talk about Gumshoe, but it has a lot of cool settings that it's been attached to. Exoterrorists and Night's Black Agents. What's the one about Dracula?
Night's Black Agents, yeah.
Night's Black Agents, yeah. The Dracula dossier is a thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Trying to remember what the sci-fi version is. I think it's Epilion? No, that's a Dragon RPG. Never mind.
Ashen Stars as well.
I was going to fight the corner for this one, so I have it all ready. We've got Ashen Stars, Exoterrorists, Fall of Delta Green, Fear Itself, Gay and Reach, Lore Finder, which is interesting as well. I haven't played it, but I want to give it a go. Mutant City Blues, Night's Black Agents, Swords of the Serpentine, Time Watch, Trail of Cthulhu, The Yellow King.
Gosh, that's a lot.
Didn't mention Bubblegum Shoe, which won on any.
It wasn't on that list.
Okay. There's also, I believe, a new one-on-one version of the rule set, which is specifically designed for one GM, one-player games. So, clearly, there's something about the system that is encouraging an awful lot of design work, both in terms of just settings and adventures for it, but also in different ways to use the system. So, it's
the Lore Finder is something I actually really want to have a go of, because, so one of the things that...
That's Garth Hanrahan's one, is it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. But,
yeah, because he's only done one thing.
It's for people who want to play Pathfinder but hate Pathfinder. A lot of the adventure paths have these great stories arcing on. Again, you're trying to stop the big bad and doing all that kind of stuff and figuring out what's going on with this ancient horror, blah, blah, blah. But you just hate D&D style combat where you're just rolling initiative and then grinding away hit points. Lorefinder is basically like that. It's really trimmed down Pathfinder, so you can really focus on the narrative and story element. And that's it. Really, it's a narrative and story game. That's what it's for.
Yeah, and then you also have Swords of the Serpentine, which is sort of going for that, high adventure pulp, bit of Lankmar and Thieves World in it, bit of D&D. Yeah.
The only thing I'll say negative about it is the chase reels suck, but chase reels always suck. They're probably the least bad chase reels I've seen.
The problem that I have with Gumshoe is that I just don't find it fun to use as a system. The games that it's in are probably going to be great, but so there's two sides of it. There's your investigative skills where you have a pool of points, and you can say, well, I'm going to use my art history skill on the painting, and then you might get some information, and then you can optionally spend one of your limited pool of points to get some more information. And I don't know, you don't really get a big sense of success out of that, and there's a little element of stress of your pool of points getting lower. Am I gonna waste this on some nonsense art history looking at a painting thing, and I'm gonna need this further down the line for something important. And then there's the action skills, where again you've got a pool of points that you can add. You can take some from to add to a D6 roll, and that either I can spend no points and roll my D6 and just rely on luck, and that's stressful. And if you make it, I only get this sense of whew, thank goodness I just scraped through that, which isn't super badass feeling. Or you can go if I need to get a 7, then I could spend 5 points and save one, and I'm almost certainly going to win. And if you don't make it by rolling a 1, then you feel like an idiot. And if you do make it, you feel that was just 5 points that I spent through into basically guaranteeing a success.
I would describe that as not the one thing. I describe it as a strength, really, because it's all about calculated risk, and I really enjoy that calculated risk. How much do you want to spend on that point, and how badly do you want to get this off, and what's the consequence of failure for it? As opposed to just straight up roll a d6 just to see or not. No.
I find it's got the downsides of let's say normal game systems in terms of the feeling that evokes in me, but without the positives.
You see, one thing I guess I hate in role playing games is just raw luck. So for me, being able to weight luck is a very strong strength for me.
One big problem I have with Gumshoe is actually the thing it's described as being the system for is the investigations. The idea that there's clues that you simply can't miss. It feels an awful lot like that.
You have a problem with that?
Yeah, I do, because if I've got an investigation I want to run in a game or want to play in a game, I want to actually be given all of the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, and it be up to me as a player generally, with perhaps some caveats for character stuff. I'd like to be able to actually have something in front of me I can solve, that is there to be solved, rather than this abstraction around, well, you definitely find these clues and then maybe you're going to roll or spend for other things. In the sense that I really like the Sherlock Holmes stories where I could actually kind of figure it out if I paid attention, versus the ones where you're just told how Sherlock Holmes figures it out. And the Gumshoe system kind of feels like the latter a little too often for me.
Is that a system thing or a GM style thing?
I think it's a bit of both, really.
Both.
If you're running a D&D game and you have a DC whatever perception check that the entire module hinges on, you've just written a bad module. If you have written a Gumshoe game where, it should be degrees of success. It should be, okay, at a base level, you search this place, you find this. In the same way that in your role-playing game, it's you turn up, you search, you find this. How well you succeed or how much resources you push at it should define how much you find. Which it will in any system, but I guess it's just much more formulaic that you can just spend a point and you get maybe the best success level. It's just a way of making sure that your players get the information as opposed to being beholden to dice for whether or not they found that or not. I'm sick of the terrorism of the dice.
But it's not just terrorism. Like, sometimes you get that cathartic release of, like, yes, I did a clever thing. And I think, I feel that the game system of Gumshoe.
But rolling a 6 isn't clever. There's nothing clever about rolling a 6.
Well, not the way you do it.
No arguments there, but that's not what this game that's not what this system purports to do. I think in a certain sense, it's trying to solve an irritation that the writers have had in other systems.
Mick, I got a 6 because I rolled a 1, but I spent 5 points in advance to make sure I got that 6 because this was important.
Bye those 5 points. Should have rolled better. How are we on time for this one?
Getting there. But, like, okay, so the thing is just I find Gumshoe dry to play as a system.
Which is, like, I really like the settings attached to it, but the system I just sort of bounce off. I really like the settings. I think there's probably one of the strengths. The only system that has better settings is probably Blades in the Dark, but that's by the by.
Settings? It has one setting.
Well,
no. The Blades in the Dark family is a whole. Like, as I described, it's got you can do Star Wars, you can do Black Combat.
Well, that's time.
I think there's a police procedural. Now we're at time. Okay, will we move on to the last one then?
alright.
Oh, I can't wait to find out what this is.
Because what joy there is here. You really like Pass the Parcel, don't you, Evil Robot?
Alright, so...
What's last? No roll required. Auto crit.
Yes, the final of our big four is Deadlands.
Oh my god!
I wonder how this made it. Who did it kill?
It has gone through Promethean the Unchained? I can't remember.
Doozy.
I still have no idea why that was there. Go on.
Changeling.
Also Doozy.
It's like shooting into an orphanage and declaring you want to go.
Oh, sorry, the Changeling fans might wish to disagree, but it has beaten AD&D First Ed.
Yeah, probably in his retirement.
And it's beaten, your It's Complicated entry of Lancer.
Well, you know what? Stick a sheriff's badge on it and call it justice.
Yeah, we're all young. We've all made mistakes.
Here, look, Lancer's got a bit the same pedigree as Blades does, so, if Blades is here, we can say Lancer deserved a semi-final place.
Why do you think I put Lancer up there as a sort of a decoy?
Because you like the pictures. Same reason you do everything.
You've fallen for my trap. Lancer was just a decoy. It's over its corpse. I've steered Blades into a shot of the title. Right. So we're not going to dwell on the freshest kid on the block. We're going to talk about Deadlands, Dead in Arrival, more like. what happened to this game? What can we even say this is a system at this point? It's been sort of parceled out and licensed away into. Well, we still.
Well, I mean, Deadlands is alive now. It's just alive as Deadlands Savage Worlds, you know. And I guess the system itself originally was very good, very flavorful, but it had big problems, particularly for some of the magic classes.
We have, in fact, done an entire episode about the original system.
Yeah. The magic was really where it majorly broke down. Other than that, I thought it was reasonably solid. Some of the fear roll mechanics, I guess, were a little bit bad, but that's kind of the point. You're facing mad stuff. I guess that the thing I've always found funny with Deadlands is it's a bit of a different game if the players know the backstory. Because you can throw a spoiler tag on this one, but initially you...
Oh God, what are you about to do, you maniac?
It's gonna have to fight with all of its strength. So let's.
I'll keep it vague. Basically, you know, at a basic level, you're cowboys, and mad stuff starts to happen. But basically, there's this whole backstory going on, whereby nasty stuff's going into the world and feeding on fear. And when you know that's the case, it kind of changes the story a little bit, and the players can kind of get a bit of a glimpse into it because they can get tale telling, which can help bring down the fear and improve the situation overall. But it's kind of like the solution to it may not be to charge in guns blazing because, you know, you may just make things worse. I've always found that a little odd. But I mean, I don't know. I've had a tremendous amount of fun playing Deadlands. It's Wild West, which people enjoy, and it's got zombies and, you know, mad monsters, which people enjoy as well, you know?
It's very easy to evoke Deadlands. Zombie with a 6-shooter is a great image.
Make a character. Grab a deck of cards, start flipping them out, and that's that. You know, using that to assign your stats and stuff. Like,
I have a lot of time for the setting.
The original one, in terms of the aesthetics to the game itself, it just fit perfectly. There were problems with the system, but you know, we're giving Call of Cthulhu a pass for its shoddy system, so we can perhaps give Deadlands a pass for its shoddy system as well.
Well, I'm always going to vote for the Savage Worlds version, so I'm sort of biased in that myself. I will say one thing. Deadlands has survived its own system in a way that you can very easily compare it to Call of Cthulhu. It is a very evocative setting. Like, it really sells its take on the Weird West very well. And, you know, the very fact that it does have this troublesome system, which is a bit too random for a lot of people, but yet it has this enduring legacy that makes people keep wanting to put versions of it out there. That just really speaks to the strength of the setting and how it sells it.
One thing I'd say is I don't know that I've seen anybody else do it, and I know that they get some flack because some of them aren't written particularly well, but the dime novels for Deadlands are great. For one reason, right? So you read the story, and a lot of times the story isn't very good, but it gives you an idea of how an adventure involving whatever bad guy is in the dime novel would potentially flow. It gives you ideas for it too. And then you look on the back of the book, and it includes all of the rules for how to make this setting with it. So, like, one thing that we were discussing in the run-up to this, because we had both Call of Cthulhu and Deadlands, it has Adios Amigos is one of the Dime Store books, and it includes rules for converting characters back and forth from Call of Cthulhu. And the stats for the monsters.
An amazing artifact. Look it up, guys. It's just the wildest thing.
I mean, like, it's rubbish, but like Dime Store novels were supposed to be like junk popcorn that people picked up. Like, it's one of the ways that literacy proliferated is because people had cheap crap to pick up and read.
It's not how Deadlands proliferated. The problem with Deadlands and well, why am I even saying this? I love Deadlands. Like, and Liam hit the nail on the head with the word fun. Like, it is just so much fun. Zombie cowboys and poker chips and playing cards and D12s and, you know,
exploding
magic
dice
and guns and stuff. It's great. It is so much fun. But and a problem with it, which we can choose to exclude if we want, I suppose, is that it got overdone. So as Scarr was talking about the very evocative setting, like, yeah, the core setting of it is exactly that. Like, it's really I'm not gonna, tight isn't the word, but like it really kind of flows, and yeah, and if you're into it, you can certainly have people playing all the different types of characters, but equally you can have some complete beginners who don't know anything about Deadlands or anything, and you can have them just start off as ordinary player characters and then learn slowly about the existence of hucksters and mad science and all this kind of stuff. Either can work fine. but it got expanded out into stupiditude with your crossovers with Call of Cthulhu and Werewolf and bloody pirates and kung fu and
back east source book, and then the sunken California where you started bringing on your martial artists and the steam thing. Basically, California sank, and there's now a maze, and there's lots of pirates fighting over it.
Role-playing game writers really don't like California. They're always knocking it into the sea.
Well, a lot of them are in Texas, I believe, so there's a rivalry there.
So, balancing on that tectonic shelf. You could even get to Earthdawn from here, couldn't you, if you really wanted to? Like, there's lots of places it could go. Can we talk about why it had to sort of jump off of its own system, like a man off a raft? Like, given how evocative it was in terms of poker chips and hands of cards and all the rest. Like, what is it that sort of upended that ship for Deadlands, the setting, that it had to migrate to? It's gone to a whole bunch of places, isn't it? Like,
I think basically they wanted to make a generic setting, a generic system, and Deadlands fits Deadlands, but I don't think it would really work with anything else, because as I say, it does kind of have that whole emulating poker and cards and card games and stuff, and Savage Worlds has a little bit of that, in that you have your draws for initiative.
Same writer, of course, Shane Lacey Hensley.
Yeah,
it's slow. Like it's of its era. It's like Shadowrun and World of Darkness and all that kind of stuff. Like, it requires a fair bit of poring through your character sheet and picking out what exactly dice you're going to need for this. And therefore, like, the flow around the table, especially in combat and stuff like that, is slow. Like, you're going to be sitting there waiting for your turn to come up for quite a while. However, I think the payoff for that is when your turn does come up, it's amazing. Like, it's so rewarding.
Yeah, I just keep thinking back to the anecdote on how Savage Worlds was originally conceived. Was that the people at Pinnacle Entertainment Group were sitting around saying, let's play a little, Deadlands one shot, and they started and they realized, we don't want to go through Deadlands character creation, and they just picked up like the Deadlands war game that they had sitting around and started bashing that into making characters that they put into like a rail heist or something, and that was how they came up with the idea for Savage Worlds. So I think that's very evocative of, like, if you could get Deadlands running on all cylinders, yeah, that's great, but the original system has just this clunkiness to it that just gives it like a barrier to entry, even to the people who conceived it. So I can understand why it had to eventually make the jump to Savage Worlds. But that being said, like, I really like Savage Worlds, and if someone would say I want to run some Deadlands in the Savage Worlds system, I'd be right there for it. Although, admittedly, I may want to play one of those martial artists that Shane hates so much, so I don't know if we'd play together.
Actually, they are great. They're just not very Deadlands,
Yeah, you can work on it.
I think that anecdote you said there, that's not a failure of Deadlands. That is a failure of the people who are wanting to play Deadlands because they have forgotten how to experience joy.
All of these systems, we throw the fault back onto the players and the GMs, but there's nothing wrong with the systems, of course. Right, I think I know where I'm going to land on this one. Just on the subject of simply going off the images, it is worth noting that Deadlands got its start, at least in part. Shane Lacey Hensley was looking at some of Brom's artwork. I think Brom did the cover, the zombie.
I have got that picture cover on my snowboard. And that wasn't even something that I, had custom done. That zombie cowboy.
Yeah, he saw a similar picture that Brom had done of a gunslinger vampire, and that inspired him to go write this. So sometimes picture first, and then we'll, good idea, and then we'll figure out something else.
Let's not forget as well that Deadlands is probably the only game on here that's endorsed with a picture in the book. Shane has a signed copy by Mr. Bruce Gamble.
We know where Shane's top points are going. Do
you still have that signed copy?
Oh, god damn right, it's the leather bound.
Would we say, so points against, it's not very generic. There's not really There's no good place to go from here.
Look, I don't think you can say that's a negative point, because if you're making a cowboy game, make a cowboy game.
Oh, play Aces and Eights. It's fantastic.
No, that's a very different cowboy game. That's I'm going to die of dysentery in a week cowboy game.
It's basically Oregon Trail. And probably even slower than any of the 90s games that were sort of contemporaries of Deadlands.
Yeah, here's the thing though. Has any other Wild West game done the distance that that Deadlands has and made it this far? Because like you look at like what's the second best? Like you say Aces and Eights, and that's fine. But that's a relatively modern game that is not tremendously well known. I consider that the next biggest cowboy game in circulation is probably like Boot Hill, which was basically a war game that from the 80s.
That's before my time.
Kirk's Wild West.
Well,
Yeah.
I'd say use Savage Worlds if you want to run a cowboy game. Very well suited.
Well, yeah, that's entirely fair, but that sort of proves my point, is that it is the Deadlands has sort of made itself the poster child for cowboy action in the RPG space, and I think that lends itself the credence that, you know, not just its system or its setting, is that it's what has made the cowboy genre so enduring in the RPG space, and it has sort of pioneered the Weird West take on the whole thing. So I feel like, you know, we gotta give it kudos for that, because like where are its rivals? They're dead in the dirt. They are in Boot Hill, as they say.
I'd say it's a bit of a weakness in the market. To answer that question, why can't we name another good, straight, popular, and widely known cowboy RPG? Probably for the same reason we can't name a good, straight police procedural RPG, or a good, straight men on a mission RPG. They all tend to sell in the RPG space. They all tend to need to have some element of the esoteric or fantastic or magical to stand out. The thing that would stand out most at this point is a really good Hill Street Blues RPG that you could get your teeth into without ever needing to bring up Dracula or Cthulhu or cultists or anything like that. I'd name Ace and Eights because it's the one I know, but it's by no means a particularly useful system in terms of, it's very evocative of the setting at the time, but it's a bloody, I mean, you want to talk about dry, there's Death Valley and there's the rules for most of the systems.
Look, Mick, if we don't get the right price per head of cattle, like we're out of business.
Can't afford molasses.
So I would love that Hill Street Blues game to exist, but I think this might come back to the Call of Cthulhu thing, where like some genres just fit better into some media than others, and perhaps police procedural and man on a mission just doesn't really work as well in role-playing games as it does in other places, and I guess the supernatural thing is a really easy way to have big distinction between different characters, which I think is a really important thing in a role-playing game party.
Yeah, that's probably a topic for another episode. Why aren't there more, just as for want of a better word, why aren't there more straight systems? But I think we've run through. That's it.
Right.
Puncture's traded.
Everybody roll your quick draw, then you're shooting, and then you're fanning.
Deadlands is such a mess, but like it's so much fun.
When you explode a dice and then it explodes again.
Oh, sorry. Now we're being clever by rolling well on our dice.
It fits some systems sometimes, you know. Like with that, it's like how does that mitigate against it? It mitigates against it because I really invested in my shooting skill. I've got 5d10 and I'm going to roll it, so it doesn't matter that I got a 1 because I got a 10 and I got a whole bunch of 9s and 5s or whatever the hell. That's mitigating against just like crap out luck.
Feels so good.
I'm just going to put my votes in order that we talked about them.
All right.
This is really hard.
Don't post them yet. We're just going to.
Nope.
We did. I wrote mine out, so I guess I have to type it into something, do I?
Yeah. So while we're going to drop them into chat. So while we do that, folks. So we have finally, we've finally gotten here. This is over a year in the making, I believe. We started out with 64, and now we have down to the final 4. And we've had a final 4 hosts. We've had Shane, Evil Robot Shane, one of the founders. We've had Liam, who is can't get rid of at this point. He's just too good at what he does, whatever that is. There's Warlord Scarr, who's pretty much propping up the whole endeavor at this point. And myself, we came up with about the same time. I'm Savage Mick. I'm here mostly for color commentary and drinking. We are about to vote on our
Remember, the one that you want is the one that gets the most points. Everyone is giving a 4 points, 3 points, 2 points, and 1 point in their order of preference. And we're going to see who's someone going to get a straight 16, or are we going to have to get down in the dirt again?
I guarantee you that's not going to happen. Are we ready to vote?
Has everyone put in their four entries?
I'm hovering over my return key. 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Oh, I see 2 1s for that system. That's not going to go well.
These are all over the place, actually. Just looking at these without quickly doing the maths, these are all over the place in terms of what's polling with whom.
Well, heaven forbid we should have a clear mandate or anything like that. This way we can have civil war in like 4 directions.
I see a winner. Do you want me to do this, Liam, or...?
Yeah.
Okay, so, folks, we've totted up our points in our secret ballot, and it seems that at the bottom, with some big numbers and a lot of lower numbers, is Call of Cthulhu, which the giant bestriding the ocean and the cosmos has unfortunately fallen by the wayside. For second and third place, we have a tie on one. Blades in the Dark has very polarized opinions with 2 1s and 2 4s.
Yeah, I feel like this is a lack of exposure. It could have won.
Maybe. Gumshoe has done the entire gamut with 1 of each. So got 1, 2, 3, and 4 points. But the winner by a single point, and none of them 4s, none of them 1s, is Deadlands.
OMG. Yeah, that's how it should be.
Well deserved win.
If I had guns, I'd be firing them in the air right now.
Yeah, there's no way that should have gotten anybody's outright best role-play game of all time vote, because it isn't. But now it is.
But it got enough consensus that no one... Yeah, I kind of feel like that makes sense.
Not being loved or hated enough.
Well, and quite the thing. It's, what do we make of that? Okay, Deadlands, best role-playing game out of the 64 tested, and possibly of all time.
Well, Owen's not going to be happy.
It has the advantage of it's got a really easy hook. It's got 1 foot in history, 1 foot in fantasy. It has proven to be fairly, like the system honestly doesn't matter. Run it with whatever you're going to run it with, because as long as it's got some cards and chips to throw around, it'll feel enough like poker.
The fact it's got those options is a strength of it, I think.
Yeah. You can adjust to your own level. I'm sure someone's written the D&D 5th Ed primer for Deadlands.
There was Deadlands D20, which is an abomination, obviously.
The less said about that, the better.
There you go. That's something for everybody, even people we hate.
I mean, Deadlands really is crying out for a new edition, and a new, not Savage Worlds edition, like a new, polished up, streamlined, the clunkier rules from the original one. Take the magic stuff and fix it. You know, like the shamans got absolutely screwed. The hucksters, it was really difficult to get anything off. Like if you could polish all that up, I'd be all over it.
Can I just point out how many similarities there are between this and Blades in the Dark? It's turn of the century. It's magic and technology. It's flintlock pistol. You know, it's got all of that, the same kind of energy. It's going to need a little bit more time to get the groundswell of popular opinion. I must go and see if I can buy some Blades in the Dark artwork. See if I can get it signed. Hopefully, when we do this in 10 years' time, it'll be. Oh yeah.
Get the cover on your.
Bruce Campbell will still do anything for money, you know. So
they cover my snowboard, yeah. Dare I get a tattoo?
Yeah. So like, this is. I can be not ashamed of this result. I think. I was worried that we were going to declare some. Well, for a little while it was looking there like it might be Lancer.
It's all part of the plan, boys.
But yeah, like the Adventuring Party has declared Deadlands the best role-playing game of all time. Like people are going to see that and go, well that fits, or yeah, okay, that I can see why they might think that. Or, yeah, well, that's the adventuring party for you. But, like, nobody's going to go, like, well, that's just plain outright nonsense.
Well, they're going to assume it would be because of our dear fellow host Hida Owen, but of course he's not here. But we had plenty of Hida energy. Like we've all listened. I think most of us have been at least casually acquainted with some aspects of Deadlands because of the enthusiasm that people like Hida and Shane here show for it, and that counts for a lot. You know, if someone else has got big energy about a game, you're gonna remember that. You're going to sort of think more favourably of it. And I think it's no accident that Deadlands won.
Battling Burke, Mayor of Chicago.
Here's the thing, though. Every Deadlands fan I've met who's played the original system will 100% tell you the system is terrible in this way, but they'll still say, "Oh yeah, no, I love it. I love the system," and that says something. I love the game. And that really says something about Deadlands as a combined entity. It's just like, yeah, you can look at any single part and start pointing out flaws for days, but as a cohesive whole, it's just got this energy to it. And even me, who isn't particularly tremendously fond of, going back to the Old West and playing with all the slightly dodgy politics and race dynamics and such, I still would be interested in going into Deadlands and playing around with a bit of fantasy elements. And,
you can also decide how much of that you want to play up and downplay, like the whole thing is that certainly for like a lot of the racial and gender stuff, it's kind of glossed over already by default in that the Civil War is still going on. And manpower levels being what they are, they're like, yeah, women can work whatever job they want. Why? Because, well, the Civil War is still going on and people are dying all over the place. We need women to work in industry as well. And depending on where you're set in the game, a lot of the racial stuff can get toned down as well. Now, there can be a lot of like, you've got the foreigner trait. You're the Asian guy who's working on the railroad, and yeah, there's a lot of discrimination against you. But like, it's up to you how much of that you want to emphasize in your game.
Yes, because it's kind of inconsistently written as a whole, which in a funny way is a strength.
You can adjust that if you want to face that head on and work with it and sort of counterpoint, the horror of man versus the horror of the ghosts that come out of the coal. You could do that. You could do a man is the real enemy thing very easily, or you can go full, nonsense kung fu fighting zombies. You're a Native American guy with 2 tomahawks having a fight with a werewolf. It's fine. It survives both, and I think that grit, that survivor's instinct, is possibly Deadlands' biggest. It's the reason it got this far, because it's willing to take a couple of bullets and keep fighting.
Good luck trying to run it online, though.
Oh yeah.
I haven't tried, but can you imagine like your deck of cards and you need to be able to toss around poker chips and deal out your deck of cards, and and how many people have all the dice that they're going to need and so on. Yeah.
If a VTT is built for that, though, that could work pretty seamlessly. Like, if the engine's built for it, a lot of that stuff you can have it's automatically handled.
No, fake cards and fake poker chips. You must be kidding me. I'm calling you out, Mister.
Too far for you. I'll just go to D&D Beyond and roll my fake dice across the screen here. I can't imagine how they'd manage anything like that. Forge, what is it? Fantasy Forge, or what's the one that Hida Owen pumping all the time? Foundry, yeah. I suspect if you're going to find a good Deadlands VTT, it's probably on Foundry.
There is not one at the moment, but it doesn't mean somebody's not working on it.
Speaking of, we touched upon the trouble with the insensitivities of the Wild West setting. You could do worse than look to places like Bone Tomahawk, which is a great Kurt Russell horror movie set in the Wild West, and it fairly deftly moves around the idea of simply seeing Native Americans as the evil other by kind of taking a kind of a Hills of Eyes cannibal Holocaust approach, saying, look, there are Native Americans, and as it turns out, some of them are awful, just like most people, because most of the other people in the movie are awful as well. So I think you've got to treat it as a pulpy game and not get too stuck in the weeds on that sort of stuff. It's up to us to take old systems that were written in different times and make them palatable for the players that we play with. and the people we play with, and that we're careful not to repeat the mistakes of the past or to spread foolish one-note ideas about people that we don't know. But there's nothing wrong with some good bad guys, as it were, no matter what stripes they are. There's plenty of undead, there's plenty of weird sort of zombie alien.
And Americans can be evil cultists trying to summon horrible stuff just as much as everybody else.
Exactly. So, cut that cloth to suit your sail, as it were. But yeah, so we've got a winner. We've got an hour and change under our belt. We have arrived at a strangely fulfilling and an agreeable consensus after all of that. And as we said at the top of the show, we'd try and be gentlemen afterwards. So let us know your opinions in the comments, in the Discord. Come and find us there at the Adventuring Party. You can see our voting if you head for... Well, we'll post that in one of the general channels just in case it doesn't show up in the green room. And so Warlord Scarr, any other mad ideas for a short series of episodes to find the best of something? Anything else you'd like to... Now that we're finished? All right, did you think we'd ever finish? Are we finished?
We're finished. We're finished. Oh. It was supposed to be just for March.
Just for March, yeah. Let's close it out then. What have we done?
We've gone through 64 of the most popular RPGs that we could find, except Basics D&D, because we're idiots. We've picked through them, debated them back and forth for far too many episodes, and we've come to the conclusion that when it comes down to it, we're all old men who remember the early 2000s very fondly and think that the cowboy game is the best one. And I'm sure our very young and very hip audience are going to be very mad at us. But that's just what we did.
Tell them to go cry into their D&D Beyond account.
I'm glad we put such a gloss on it. Check it out, guys. Guys, gals, whoever. It's a great setting, and you've got a choice of systems. So what more could you want?
The newer ones are probably easier to pick up, although they do lose a lot of the card.
All right, Scarr, close us out.
Thus does the Warlord declare that the winner of this grand tournament is Deadlands. And should you say me nay, you shall meet us on the battlefields of Discord to complain about it at length, or our other social media. But for now, this contest and this party is over. Thanks for listening to The Adventure Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike on Version 3 license.